Kyiv and Moscow agree deal to resume Ukraine grain export from Black Sea ports, UN chief says. The deal was stuck after months of negotiations brokered by the UN and Turkey. CNN. Ukraine and Russia have agreed a deal that would allow a resumption of vital grain export from Ukrainian Black Sea port, a major diplomatic breakthrough aimed at easing a global food crisis sparked by the war. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Friday. Ministers from both countries signed an agreement brokered by the United Nations and Turkey in Istanbul. The breakthrough followed months of negotiations and promised to unblock a port on the Black Sea to allow the safe passage of grain and oilseeds, some of Ukraine's most important exports. Russia has so far been blocking maritime access to those ports, meaning that millions of tons of Ukrainian grain has not been exported to the many countries that rely on it. Today, there is a big beacon on the Black Sea, a beacon of hope, a beacon of possibility, a beacon of relief in the world that needs it more than ever, Guterres said Friday. Promoting the welfare of humanity has been the driving force of these talks, he said. The question has not been what is good for one side or the other. The focus has been on what matters most for the people of our world. And let there be no doubt, this is the agreement for the world. Guterres said the deal will bring relief for developing countries and help stabilize global food prices, which are already at record levels even before the war, the true nightmare for developing countries. The World Food Program, called WFP, estimates that 47 million people have moved into a stage of acute hunger as a consequence of the Ukraine war, and Western officials have accused Russia of using food as a weapon during its invasion. The deal will also allow the impeded access of Ukrainian fertilizers to global market. Russia is a major producer of fertilizers, which are vital to maximizing food production, and the cost of the product has spiraled since the invasion. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said millions of people will be relieved of this danger of hunger as the result of the deal. In the coming days, we will see the start of ship traffic, and many countries will have a breath of fresh air, Erdogan said. A route out of war for Ukrainian grain. How will this deal work? As part of the deal signed Friday, grain ships will navigate through a safe corridor in the Black Sea under the direction of Ukrainian pilots and then pass through the Bosporus Strait, the important shipping corridor in northwest Turkey, in order to reach global market. Vessels would be inspected before they arrived in Ukraine by Russian, Ukrainian, and Turkish officers to ensure weapons are not being smuggled into Ukraine. The ships will be monitored by the Joint Coordination Center, which will be established immediately in Istanbul and include representatives from Ukraine, Russia, and Turkey. Both parties have agreed that there should be no attacks on any of the vessels going from those ports out of territorial waters into the Black Sea by any party. Before the deal was signed, the Ukrainian government warned Russia against any provocations. no transport escort by Russian ships, and no presence of Russian representatives in our port. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the Ukrainian President Chief of Staff, tweeted on Friday. In case of provocations, an immediate military response, he added. Podolyak also added that Ukraine was not signing an agreement with Russia, but with Turkey and the UN. He also said the inspections of ships would be carried out in Ukrainian waters by joint groups if necessary. The Black Sea will not be demined, a lengthy and complex process that the UN's mining expert, as well as Turkey and Ukraine, agreed was a non-starter. Naval mines in the Black Sea have provided a significant obstacle in effort to restart grain export, with Ukraine and Russia accusing each other of mining the waters. Why are grain exports so important? Ukraine and Russia are both significant suppliers of food to the world. In normal times, Ukraine, known as one of the globe's breadbaskets, with export around 3/4 of the grain it produces. According to data from the European Commission, about 90% of these exports were shipped by sea from Ukrainian's Black Sea port. The war and its impact on grain export therefore has major implications, particularly in the global south, which relies heavily on them. Between disrupting Ukrainian agricultural production and blocking the export of products that remain, Russia's war in Ukraine could push 49 million people into famine or famine-like conditions, the United Nations warned last month. The World Food Program estimates that 47 million people have moved into a stage of acute hunger as a consequence of the Ukraine war. This year's harvest is underway in Ukraine, adding further urgency to negotiations. Fields have come under attack in recent days, leaving farmers racing to save their crops. Storage issues have also hampered farmers. Last month, a grain storage silo was destroyed in the city of Mykolaiv, which Ukraine says Russia hit with air-based cruise missiles. The UN is hoping that, under the deal, a monthly export of 5 million tons of grain would leave the port each month, a figure comparable to pre-war levels. How has the war impacted Ukraine's harvest? While the ability to export grain to the Black Sea is the major breakthrough, the amount Ukraine can ship has been severely affected by war. The president of the Ukrainian Grain Association, Mykola Horbachev said on Friday that unblocking Ukrainian ports is the only way to prevent a global food crisis and save Ukrainian agriculture producers. He said the Russians had stolen about 500,000 tons of grain in occupied territories, and approximately 1 million tons of grain remains in the elevators under the control of the occupiers. Earlier this month, Ukrainian's Grain Traders Union said it expected a grain and oilseed harvest of 69.4 million tons, marginally higher than previous forecasts, but far below the 106 million tons harvested last year. Agriculture Minister Taras Pisotsky said the grain harvest could be at least 50 million tons compared to the 86 million tons in 2021. At least half that output is embarked for export, according to the traders union. The production and export of wheat in an already tight global market may be most at risk. French consultancy Agritel said this month it expects Ukraine to harvest 21.8 million tons of wheat this summer compared to the 32.2 million last year. Ukraine's infrastructure minister Oleksandr Kubrakov described the deal that he signed at the Istanbul ceremony as the great support for the Ukrainian economy. Will Russia stick to the deal? Western officials have accused Russia of deliberately strangling the global supply chain during the country's war in Russia. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen has said that food was part of the Kremlin's arsenal of terror, and the US accused it of having weaponized food. The US and the other Western nations have hailed Friday's agreement, but US State Department spokesman Ned Price cautioned on Thursday when the agreement was reached in principle that Washington would focus on holding Russia accountable for implementing this agreement. British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said Friday, "The UK and our allies have been pushing hard to reach this point. Now this agreement must be implemented, and we will be watching to ensure Russia's actions match each word."